All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. It's our appointed time. Welcome to another session of Academy for Program Coordinators. For those who are still joining in, thank you so much for taking the time and coming in. Today, we have a great session on GME Finance, and I know this was one of the sessions that was heavily requested during our needs assessment. We have a great speaker for it. Before we start, announcements. Next month, we have coordinator basic session. I'm going to send out a poll to see what are the needs that you guys have. I want to do it based on what you need to refresh your memory or know or learn more about coordinator basics. And then in November, we will have a panel discussion on promotion and why one size does not fit all. Also, you may have seen it, you may have not, but we are so excited to say that we are working on our first education conference coming up in May here in Fort Worth. More information will be coming up in the next few weeks. Our planning committee has been working so hard. So get ready. This is our first in-person event, and I hope that we have such a great turnout. In the meantime, I am so happy. I'm gonna stop my screen share. I will continue posting the links to the evaluation and the attendance in a second. I am so honored, so blessed that I love her to pieces. Jessica Hernandez and I used to work here, and Nicole, I remember when she used to work here. She was our go-to person when we started here. We love her to pieces, and her background is amazing. She's working GME, she's working UME, and if I heard correctly, her dissertation had to do with GME Finance. So that's why we asked her to do this session specifically. So please, let's enjoy this. I know there's a lot of questions. I saw this morning some prompts that people were responding to the Padlet that Jessica posted before our session. Again, guys, Jessica, I'm going to say this. Everybody has questions. We all have questions about GME Finance. So, Jessica, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here and was honored about the invite because GME, I was in GME for about 9 years and it's still near and dear to my heart. I am currently at UT Health San Antonio in UME, but I stay connected with a lot of my GME friends. So I continue to enjoy everything about higher ed GME, again, near and dear to my heart. So thank you, Aria, for the introduction. At this time, I'll share my screen. So if you guys give me some transition time. Okay.
Looks good.
All right. It kind of skipped on me, but let's so again, Jessica Hernandez, currently at UT Health. Finance is near and dear to my heart. So we'll start today. I've included a QR code that is my LinkedIn, so we can hopefully stay connected. So please feel free to snap that. There's two main goals for today's session. It will feel, and it is set up to feel more as an introduction, but I will describe some finance stream scenarios within GME. So there'll be a little bit of School of Medicine, and then there'll also be teaching hospital finance information that I'll share. And kind of naturally, there'll be some cases where they'll blend or overlap. And then secondly, I'll share a residency program cost analysis as an example So it's going to be an Excel file that I'll share that we can talk about briefly. There's a little bit going on with my screen, Aria. So do you guys see this like toolbar?
I see the check your pulse.
Okay. Okay. So before the meeting, Aria sent out a sort of check your pulse. It's a Padlet that I thought we start with there. There were a few questions that were raised, so I wanted to make sure to front load, at least kind of surface level, respond to that. So we'll start there with the Padlet. I'll put that in slideshow view. So the first comment that was made is that that this particular coordinator doesn't have an opportunity to practice with budgets. Kind of my immediate response to that was there might be great reasoning behind that. What I discovered in my time in GME and even now in UME is budgets can quickly become complicated because of the different ways that finances can work. So my intro slide said a matrix introduction because that's exactly how I feel like budgets are. It's not this simple budget that we might experience in our personal life where it's like you have this overarching budget and you plug and play within that one single budget. Not definitely not the case in graduate medical education. So I kind of reflected on this. In this case,
Jessica, your sound is coming in and out.
okay, let me try. Let me try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better?
Yeah, try again.
You experience that again.
Yeah, it comes and goes, but now it's a little bit better.
Okay. Um, so my reflection is I'm excited that you want to practice it, but there might be a reason why maybe it's the case that they don't give you the opportunity to do that, not to say it's an option that you can explore. So the next comment, making the budget, advocating for program needs, getting it approved and tracking trends across the year, feel good about. So that's an amazing start. But there's this constant monthly balancing that is required. There's a lot of items, expense items that go into a budget. So I believe this is what this is referring to. So ins and out of what the department does want, what form systems, there's a lot to comprehend. That is a little bit as to what I prefaced to in the beginning. It is a complexity of streams that go into a budget. So to feel this way, I would say is normal. The next one, it's talking about not enough money in the budget. You know, there's resident wants, there's resident needs, there's program needs, program wants. Some to include here examples that were given were raises, but there is a lot of restrictions in GME budget, and it's hard to understand that in some cases. At the tail end of today, I'll share the resident cost analysis. That might be a little bit of a sneak preview as to why this is the case. So we definitely will see a little bit of more insight as to maybe the why behind this one comment, again, at the tail end. This comment was about the overcomplicated and burdensome, outdated methods that go into maybe tracking budgets.
Let's see. So I think the main question was many of us are unsure if we will even have core budgets for required costs this year. That will depend. So this question, I would say, really depends on the institution that you're working with. What is the scenario? Is it a private institution? Is it a state institution? Is it a teaching hospital? Is it an academic medical center? All of those types of scenarios will definitely sometimes complicate a budget. So that might be why sometimes it seems unknown, but it might also be the case that there is maybe a finance team who's tracking this for you. And again, an opportunity to work really closely with your department heads to try to get those answers, because it does help to know who to go to and where the streams are flowing. There was a comment about this individual understand the basis, but there's a lot of acronyms as we experience in medical education. Budgets is no different. So the DME, IME that comes from the CMS, which is the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services. The DME is direct medical education, and I stands for indirect. The IRIS report, it is, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few, is that is also a hospital-based report that occurs for those teaching hospitals who have residency programs. So no different than any other medical education setting where acronyms do exist. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a few. There was a comment about tracking budgets. My immediate reflection to this was, and they mentioned sub-accounts. So I wondered if this was a state institution, because I had experienced the same in my previous setting. In any case, I have discovered again that GME budgets have different buckets, whether that be the funding buckets that come in, and definitely the expenditures. So at the end of the day, I would say you will find a system that works best for you. I will also say that do a little bit of discovery, reach out to your program, your administrators, and ask the question, what exactly is it that you're wanting me to track, and why? And a little bit of that you'll see in a second, maybe as to answering the why. So hopefully we get a little bit more detailed about this question as well. This individual just wanted a reintroduction, so hopefully I do that for you today. And this is just me saying thank you to those who responded. Definitely this Padlet's here. I'll keep it open if there's ever any kind of questions that I can follow up with. So I'll toggle back to our presentation and we'll move on. Before we get started in the funding scenarios, I just wanted to kind of set the tone to say that what you hear today, what you see today, might partially apply to you, might not. And that's because every program can operate differently. Again, it'll go back to the setting, what type of institution are you working with, collaborating with is another piece. So please ask questions as you have them, because I will, in a second, I will share a few scenarios, but if there's any questions that surface, please unmute yourself, please put it in the chat. Aria can help me moderate those questions. So please feel free to interrupt me. So I wanted to start with funding scenarios at a teaching hospital. So I know there is the ACGME sponsoring institution that is the starter of how a program is structured. I'm just going to go sort of surface level and start with hospital base. You'll note on the top right hand that I said your resident rosters matter in more than one ways. And you'll begin to understand the why behind that too in a few. I also included these visual streams. What I try to do is show where the streams are coming from versus to. So hopefully that helps also see that path of funding, where funding comes in versus out. So one of the benefits of a teaching hospital is that they can obtain CMS, which I mentioned is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. There is an IRIS report that you guys have heard, most likely, especially if you're at a teaching hospital, and that stands for the Intern and Resident Information System Report. That is the funding portion of a hospital related to residency programs / our resident. That is also where you will begin to hear direct versus indirect funding. The direct is a little bit more self-explanatory, so it's all direct expenses that a hospital can claim for funding. The indirect gets a little bit more complicated. And honestly, I don't have this equation memorized. So I went ahead and just jotted it down here for us, just so you can see a complexity that is involved in CMS funding and reporting that comes from the hospital with residency programs. So in this case, the IME formula, the C stands for there is a Congress component to that. The R is the ratio of resident to beds. And then there's like this decimal ratio that this is pretty constant. So that is a calculation that your usually hospital finance team works with, but and this is part of the reason why they work really closely with the residency program, whether they have a designated finance person or not, they will reach out to the program for information. And this is a large reason why they are trying to calculate this IRIS report component of their larger hospital budget and finance. The second that I included is the state funding. So here's another acronym, you'll hear PRA, and that stands for per resident amount, and that might vary by state. I know for the state of Texas, I believe, and I didn't look this up, but it used to be about 5,000 to 6,000. So that depends. So there is a state funding that can also apply to hospitals. There is also this window, and this is symbolic for you guys will hear there's a cap window. And this applies really to hospitals who are new and developing, sometimes referred to as virgin hospitals. The cap window is a 5-year period that a residency program has to build a max amount of residents that the state will help support. So for example, let's say it's a family medicine residency program. It's 3 years. So they'll have the 5 years to build or develop. At the end of those 5 years, how many residents were within that 5-year window is basically their cap amount for funding purposes. That is the large piece for the funding purpose. So that's like the supplemental funding that the hospital number would be based off of. And let's say it's 60. Let's say they were able to reach 60 residents during that 5 window. Post that 5-year period, if the hospital happens to expand their program, let's say to another 20 residents, the funding, the expenditures for those 20 residents is excluded for funding support because it exceeds the cap. So that is kind of the underlying cap summary and why it is a big deal and why you sometimes hear that. So you'll hear a cap is being developed or a cap has been identified. And that is where that kind of chunk comes from. Here I included a funding, and this is more a cost, but in teaching hospital scenarios, there's operation funding that is also multi-layered. In that, usually what is happening is a hospital has the opportunity to cultivate their own physician and medical educators. And that comes along as a need with the residency program, that you have these key stakeholders. In that is a funding opportunity, but also an expense opportunity. So I thought that was key to include. Another area, and this will have its own section, is the hospital. There's a funding stream that comes out of the hospital to support the residency program. And we'll see that in the cost resident analysis, because in that I did include key stakeholders, which are coordinators, program directors, and core faculty. Before I move on to the university scenario, are there any questions or clarifications that I can help with related to teaching hospitals and budgets? Hearing none, I'll move on. Aria, please let me know if any surface. The next scenario is an academic school of medicine or comm institution scenario. If you find yourself in an academic university setting that has residency programs, here's some funding scenarios that I wanted to point out. The first one is it could be a standalone situation, or it could be what's known as a consortium model. And here's where I would say that there's an overlapping of the hospital-based structure married with the university would be a consortium model, where there's funding kind of flowing back and forth because of the maybe sponsoring institution structure that they have. So that is definitely a funding opportunity exchange with teaching hospitals. And even if it's the case that they each have their own sponsoring institution, I would say that there's probably always opportunity for that. Partnership, if there is a collaboration, is pass-through of state funding, where one institution reports it, and then because of the partnership that they have, there might be some shared funding opportunities. Academic universities, just like any other state institution, they have the opportunity to be funded by the state, and that is student appropriations that occur biannually by the state. So it's a set dollar amount that a university gets per resident to help fund their residency program. Last I remembered, it was about $6,200. So as you hear that amount, it clearly is a very kind support, but maybe not to the amount that a university actually operates. So, but support is definitely welcome. There's also always opportunity for Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board grants. So that's what the THECB stands for. Universities usually have, either within their GME office or their Office of Educational Programs office, individuals who are who work closely with the coordinating board for a grant, whether that be program development, expansion grants. So I would say if you haven't logged into THECB, it's good to do so every once in a while, just to see what kind of funding opportunities exist. There is, of course, always an application process and a reporting process to that, but always a nice way of obtaining some funding support. There's other grants. So a benefit of a university is there are usually some grant writers in the institution that the GME office can work closely with if they are not comfortable in that area. So other grant opportunities usually exist within the state. So it's, a benefit of the university is, again, that they have some maybe experienced grant writers who are available to the GME office or can partner with them. University, so here I had kind of a funding outflow. So this would be in the scenario where there's teaching hospital partnerships, maybe, is the case, the resources that a university has, just because it's an academic university. It has the teaching, the educational support, so your faculty development, of course, your instructional design, individuals who are skilled with evaluation, assessment, research, and then, of course, the critical library resources that comes along with that. So funding opportunity for those who are partnered with the university, because it's almost like a funding offset to a partnership. Any questions about university funding scenarios? Next, we'll quickly go over a resident cost analysis. But before we do that, I wanted to collect from this group just real quickly, and I'll see if I can see them in the chat. If you can just mention one or two costs that you feel are included in a residency program's operation. So you could think residency program level, you can think hospital-based level, you can think partnership level. If I can have you guys just in the chat real quickly, jot that down. Salary, catering, lunches, meals, compensation, wellness, food stipends, travel, just going to keep naming a few, recruitment, meetings, graduation, books, tools, conferences, meals, didactics, IT, in-service exams, license renewals, GME, great, lab coats, boards, swag, we love our swag, memberships, orientation, onboarding, certification, simulation. I'll kind of pause it at that. This chat will kind of lightly answer one of the comments that was made in the Padlet, and that's that sometimes it feels like there's not enough funding available for program needs or wants. And I would probably toggle a little bit more to the wants. That's a little bit of a snippet view as to why. There is a lot of expense that goes out, and why both are important. The funding and the expenditure tracking are critical is because there is a lot to manage. So at this time, I'll go ahead and pull up a different file. And I'm going to go through, again, really quickly to allow us some time for questions if you have them at the tail end. But wanted to go through an example of a resident cost analysis summary. And I'll credit this template to the Germain consultants who many years I worked closely with in just reviewing this for a session that they did for us. But it was very eye-opening to see this, because many times we're just in the will of operations and we don't kind of see the holistic picture of what a budget can look like. So we're going to go down the screen, just going through a lot of line items that a program, in this case, I just use internal medicine, an internal medicine residency program, who had at the tail end 90 residents. It was 30, 30, 30. I included, I think, the most current number on here. So if you see some funding sorry, not some funding, some dollar amounts that seem plus or minus. That's because I try to update this best to today's reality of what things are costing, but some might be off a little. So please do know that. So I use our resident salary amount for the purpose of this first one, but I'm just going to kind of scroll. So we have resident salaries that come out of the budget. Fringe, plus or minus 35% is usually a fair amount. Then we have resident perks. Here's where we included things such as licensures, conference time, books, board exams, etc. So 3%. Lab coats, ballpark that at $45. Meals were factored in, and service exams. Research for the senior residents, so the scholarly activity component, ACLS. Then we get down a little bit to their tools, the personal devices, a larger chunk for recruitment because that is important, application fees, and this right would be plus or minus because if there's not one, then you could remove that. Skills assessment, simulation access, graduation expenses. So right here is the total resident personnel cost in this scenario that is for the 90 residents. So $8 million. Then we have a faculty cost. So in this scenario, right, it would depend, and this could probably be updated, but it would depend on the size of the residency program, the required faculty that's needed. In this example, I use 7 because eventually with the 90 program, I kept the 7 there. Usually academic institutions and most likely hospitals would factor in 2 components. The time allocated for their faculty who is dedicating time in GME, and then their patient care. So this amount just tallied their GME. We always have the fringe and benefits that comes with salary, so that was tagged on there. Some professional liability premiums that came with that. We had the subspecialty coordinators, it's internal medicine, so the fees that apply to that, and this one was really ballpark. And then we have the CME that comes with our faculty. So the program director meetings that they have to attend, should attend, the fees that come with memberships, and then their continuing education. So support that comes to your key stakeholders for their continued education in their leadership position. Then we move on to other GME direct expenses. So in this case, whether it's a school of medicine or if it's a teaching hospital, here's where more of the direct, it's pretty explicit. So your direct expenses that come from this residency coordinator. If it applies that there is a new innovations coordinator, if that's a system that they're using, administrative assistant, operating costs for that particular program. And then did include the resident research support. So in the end, here is the grand total for one academic year who is functioning with a, let's say, 90 count resident of 90 count, and all the operations that go into it. That is a large number. That is also a large residency program example. So this goes to show just kind of really surface level, some key items that a budget would include. Down here included some per resident allowable costs and residents. So I was talking about the CMS and the state funding. that just to show that figure as far as some possible funding that's collected. But if you see the two, there is a huge variance as to funding that comes sometimes within the institution um, that is sponsoring a residency program. To the right, I kind of just broke it down. Honestly, I broke what you just saw in the scenario of, let's say this is a new institution, you're going to start with your 30 residents, year two, and so forth. You eventually build your program. Even if you go in that kind of model, and hopefully I don't make you dizzy, but I'm going to scroll down a little. Even if you go in that model, or not model, but more so the pace, you'll see that the amounts are pretty large. And there is some variance with this in the total. And the reason for that is because I have up here 457. What that means, or what I noted that to remind me to say, is that in this case, let's say a program is developing at the initial development year, you won't need maybe the amount of core faculty that you will need at year three when you have a set of 90 residents in-house and operating. So at this time, I'll pause and would like to, either by chat or if you unmute yourself, that's fine. Just would like to hear, was this surprising to you to see this? I felt like you guys did a really nice job in the chat mentioning a lot of these fees, but I think when you see it as a summary of all the fees that could factor in, I wonder if seeing this makes you react differently. So just curious to know that.
Jessica,
Open my,
will
yes.
the spreadsheet, can it be shared? Because people are asking, some of the comments that I've been receiving were like, this spreadsheet is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll clean it up and make sort of like a cleaner version. That way you guys have one that you can make your own.
And then we have not surprised at all. Yes, it is somewhat larger than I originally thought. This is on par for what I was thinking as far as average cost per resident. And somebody, I'm still looking because very informative. So we have that too.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to unmute themselves and make a comment, feel free.
Yes, please expand if you'd like, because the next slide, and I'll close out our chat window. And I think we're at the time where we can open for questions and comments. So at this point, we have to stay curious as educators, as operators, as master coordinators that you guys are. So this is where I would say I would like to open the floor to clarify any information that you heard, expand on anything that you saw. And I will share this template again. I'll clean it up so you have had that to work from. But I will also say that it is a snippet view to a program's budget, whether you're at an institution, a teaching hospital, whether you're at an academic institution. Those kind of key items that you saw apply across the board. There is, of course, more arching items, and that is your institution's own operating items. Everything from building, the building that you're in, to the utilities, to other mills. So there's a lot of other elements that were not included. And those could vary. Those vary maybe from the institution and the support that is received. But in the end, that I was hoping to try to provide the maybe conversations that you've heard, the why some of the questions are raised about meals, staying within a budget, or report requests for data that might come your way. A little bit of the background as to why.
So we have, I'm gonna jump to Izzy first, and then Caitlin, so they can ask their questions.
Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing because I would like for this to be more conversational.
Yes, hi. I just had a question, really, in looking at the budget. You always use 90 in your numbers because but things like recruitment for instance, uh, clearly I would have thought that I would use 30 for recruitment and not because once you're recruited. So what's the logic behind using like the whole series of classes for your numbers?
Yes. So in that case, I used the case where let's say the program was 90. So I used the scenario where all positions were filled. So you had year 1, year 2, and year 3. So you had your 30, your 60, and your 90. So in total, you had 90 residents for that program that were being funded and expenditures applied to. But you're right, when you're recruiting to fill your year 1.
Right.
So that was more of like the more of the 90 count program.
Caitlin.
So when we have our budget like this, Jessica, and we are we've become the keeper of the budget, and admin, like, and you're coming under budget on some things, and you want to not reallocate, but use it in a different manner within the same line item, if that makes sense. How would you encourage us to be a better advocate as to why that fund doesn't just disappear or go away? So say we came under budget on, I'm going to use the example that I'm actually real life living right now, but
Sure.
On our resident retreat, we came in under budget by half. And so with that, we were going to reallocate the other half of that, not even the whole half of that money, to something else. And we're getting pushback on that because it could be reallocated somewhere else in the hospital now. So how would you encourage us to, because if we are the keeper of our budget with people who are above us, how would you go about, I don't know if that even makes sense, but like being a better advocate for our department?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what is going to be required, is you have to advocate. Now, how you go about doing it might depend, and you'll have to sometimes get creative, because depending how your institution operates, and I'm going to give 2 scenarios. If you are from the institution that says you have no flexibility, so be mindful when you go to set your budget. And if you say you're going to spend $2,500 at a conference, you can only spend no more than $2,500, and that's it. You can have that scenario, and I wonder if that's a little bit more of the stricter side that you're in. And then you have sort of a second scenario where institutions do require that flexibility, and they're very upfront about that, to say within, and a little bit of what I experienced here, as long as you stay within the budget that you plan for your program for the year, you're fine to be flexible and kind of shift funding around. It sounds like yours is a little bit of the first scenario that I mentioned. So advocating is definitely going to have to be the case, and I'm going to say you're going to have to make a strong case in that. Use your program champions, faculty champions, to help be the voice for you, because they many times have to take it to a different level and further advocate, further defend the why. It makes perfect sense to us, and perfect sense to us as to the why. But the individuals who are behind the screens looking at maybe an Excel sheet that I just showed you don't always have that full picture or full understanding as to why it matters to your GME program. So you'll find yourself being a storyteller at sometimes, and that's okay. So I would say my advice is bring creativity to that. Use your program directors, your DIOs to be that added voice for you.
Thank you.
We have two questions in the chat. One of them says, you talk about the PRA is per state. And how do we find that info?
Great question. So state of Texas, we have it, you could just, sorry, I should have gotten that website, but it is, sorry, CMS, I think, .gov has that for the state of Texas. I'm not sure what that looks like or sounds like for other states. So if we have individuals outside of the state of Texas, I definitely would say look through your state institutions, state institutions, to discover that amount. And sometimes it's a range. So just know that as well.
And then the second question we had in the chat says, can you address reimbursement in terms of when a resident does an away elective?
In the sense of like expenditures, like travel expenditures?
I'm gonna ask Dawn to.
Yes, hi, I'm here. No, in the sense of which entity, which facility gets reimbursed for the resident. So if they're not doing their rotation at my home university and they're doing it at someplace else, you know, I know that happens. I don't know the details of how much away time and are there certain percentages and that type of thing.
Yes, I love that you answered that question, because that is yet another complexity to GME. And I'll be upfront, I'm not going to directly answer your question because in the end, it does vary. So, I talked about the cap building period. Again, two scenarios that if this happens, most likely in one case it won't, but programs are very careful about away rotations, about our residents and where they're at, sometimes because of funding. If you're at an institution who is a new developing program, you want everyone to stay within your program, because the moment that they step outside of your organization, funding, it's almost like funding can follow them. So your program is very protective of that and should be for that reason, because they're trying to develop and want to keep it within. The same kind of applies to the question that you raised. It really depends at what state your institution is in that one scenario, or what kind of arrangement they have with the program who's doing the rotations, because that is yet another layer. So another partnership opportunity where funding and expenses kind of does this flow is depending on what kind of agreement some partnering sites have with your institution could also be a factor. So thank you, Dawn, for asking that question, because I did fail to mention that, and that definitely is a factor.
Thank you, Jessica. So that is, I find that's difficult to account for in a budget because it's sometimes not predictable, or we maybe just don't have enough knowledge and information about that.
Right. So do you, in your case, at your institution, do you have like a finance person who's kind of overhead, or do you have the responsibilities of this in particular tracking? I'm just
No,
curious.
we do have a finance person who,
Okay.
I'm sure if I asked him this question, he would give me all the details. Yes.
No, and that sometimes is what you want, just so that you can be best prepared to maybe guesstimate what you need to in your own planning.
Great. Thank you, Jess.
Another question came up in the chat. If a program is over cap, can they get some funding for the resident, either DME or IME?
So that's a great question, because that is through your teaching hospital scenario, where again, IRIS, DME, IME is only teaching hospital based. My understanding of that, and I'll say that is my understanding, is once a program is capped, the institution who has the operating program has to make up the other funds. So that's where they have to pour in to make up for the residents that exceed the cap. Now, there might be other opportunities for funding, and that is where the grants many times come into play, because they have sometimes where they have like expansion grants. In that case, it sounds like it's an expanded program because it is outside of the number of residents that they had at one time.
Anybody else has questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. We still have some couple of minutes.
Hi, I have a question. It's regarding more IRIS and documentation that I have to keep. So I am fairly new and I'm trying to figure out what I need to do, but I was told that I need to keep faculty timesheets with their hours teaching and supervising. I'm trying to figure out, do I need that for every single faculty that is in contact with the residents, or is it the core faculty, or looking at what was left for me in the files? It's one program sends like the timesheets for 3 of the faculty, and another one sends me a lot more, and another one didn't send any. So I'm just trying to figure out what it is that I need to make sure that we have in our files.
Absolutely. So I'm going to say definitely seek clarification from your hospital, because this is where the reason for the tracking is because that's a direct expense. They're taking a fraction of their salaries that's related to whatever equivalent, faculty time equivalent that they're dedicating to graduate medical education, and they're reporting that to get that back, so to speak, right? Or get a fraction of that back. Definitely your DIO, your program director, your core faculty, I would say most definitely the case. I would reach out to your finance team and ask them, is it all faculty? Because sometimes, so something that I experience is some teaching hospitals have and depending the state of teaching hospital that it is, in the sense of what level of GME commitment do they have culture-wise for their incoming physicians or clinicians. I've seen the case where there was a percentage of GME that was kind of automatically included to a lot of the faculty who were coming on board, because it was a shared commitment to the GME residency program that they had. In that case, I would say that's very direct across the board. My advice would be reach out to your finance team and seek that clarification as to, is it everyone at your teaching hospital that they want you to track that time,
Okay, thanks. The problem is that we don't really, it doesn't seem like anyone knows it's fairly new, new to GME here. So, but yes, it helps, I guess. So I'll at least collect all the core, and
Yes.
hopefully that will be.
I
Thank you.
Yes, I would say definitely, and I'm thinking spreadsheet terms, definitely one sheet that has all your core key faculty that you know are, again, core. And then a second sheet that maybe has at most the list of faculty who have some type of interaction with your resident.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I don't have a question. I do have a statement. So, hey, Jessica.
Hi, Nicole.
Jessica was my supervisor when I first started at the HSC. And I just want y'all to know that I just received an email from a site that is offering a GME budgets webinar for 1 hour for $145. And we just got a phenomenal presentation for free
Thank you, Nicole.
by Jessica. So I want to encourage everyone to use our resources that we have here to the best of our ability. We have some great resources coming out of this academy. And I just encourage y'all, let's use them. And I encourage everybody to get on board to be here in Fort Worth, Texas in May of next year for our conference.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nicole. Well, I'll say, and definitely, Aria, please take it away, but I'll say I've enjoyed my time with you all. There's great muscle memory about GME floating here. I stay connected. Please stay connected with me. And I hope the absolute best for you guys. You guys are always like the magic coordinators is what I say. So you guys do great work. And without you guys, residency programs would not operate. I know that to be true.
Jessica, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for coming in today and talking to this fabulous family, because this is our family. So I will convert this recording and post it on Facebook, LinkedIn, and send it via email this afternoon, no later than tomorrow. Trisha, I saw your question. I'm gonna send it in the email and post it on the groups so that see if we can connect you with somebody. I will, somebody saying that the evaluation is not accepting responses. Let me go in and check. Again, thank you so much. Everybody who posted their email addresses to be added to the emailing list, I will add you soon between today and tomorrow, I promise. And then if any questions that come up, feel free to email, post on our groups and everything. Remember, this is our family. This is our community. We are here to support each other. Next month, again, coordinator basics. I will send more information later. And then, guys, thank you so much. And I hope to see you again all next month. And then in May, hopefully. We're so excited. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.